Boom! That's the sound of my world exploding into a million pieces. I'm Staff Sergeant Jake Miller, a soldier who's faced insurgents, sandstorms, and sleepless nights in war zones. But nothing prepared me for the betrayal I came home to after a 10-month deployment overseas. Picture this. I'm driving up to my house in Sunnyvale Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood I fought hard to call home. My duffel bag slung over my shoulder. My boots are caked with desert, dust, and all I want is to collapse into my own bed, in my own house, maybe crack open a cold one and feel human again. Instead, I pull into my driveway and see something that makes my stomach churn. Unfamiliar cars parked where my truck belongs, kids' toys scattered across my lawn and through my kitchen window, a family eating dinner like they own the place. My heart stops. This isn't my home anymore. It's a stranger's. I bought this modest 3-bedroom house 2 years ago, a milestone after a decade of military service. It's nothing fancy. White siding, a small porch, a backyard where I plan to grill. Steaks and maybe get a dog someday. It was my sanctuary, my proof I'd made something of myself despite the chaos of deployments. The Sunnyvale Estates HOA was a pain, always nitpicking about grass height or mailbox colors, but I played by their rules. Before deploying, I took every precaution. I emailed the HOA president, a guy named Gerald who always wore too tight polo shirts, to let him know I'd be gone. I paid my dues a year in advance, $2,400, no small chunk of change. I even hired a local kid, Tim, to mow my lawn weekly so the place wouldn't look unkempt. I left nothing to chance, or so I thought. That night, jet-lagged and still in my fatigues, I knocked on my own front door, my dog tags clinking under my shirt. A guy in his 30s, wearing a polo not unlike Gerald's, answered. "Can I help you?" he asked, like I was selling cookies. I forced a smile, thinking this was a mix-up. "I'm Jake Miller. This is my house." His face twisted in confusion. "We've been renting this place for 6 months," he said. "Signed a lease with the HOA. Who are you?" My knees buckled. Renting? Lease? HOA? My mind raced. I showed him my ID, my deed, proof this was my house. He looked apologetic but said he'd paid good money to live here and wasn't leaving without proof the lease was invalid. I stumbled back to my truck, my vision blurring with rage and disbelief. Strangers were sleeping in my bed, using my shower, living my life, while I'd been dodging bullets halfway across the world. And the HOA, the people I trusted to watch over my property, had orchestrated it all. I wasn't just homeless. I was betrayed. I checked into a cheap motel that night, the kind with flickering neon signs and questionable stains on the carpet. Lying on a lumpy mattress, I replayed every detail. Had I missed a letter? An email? I pulled out my laptop and scoured my inbox. Nothing but confirmation of my HOA payments and a curt safe travels from Gerald before I deployed. My house wasn't abandoned. It was maintained, paid for, mine. Yet here I was, a soldier who'd fought for freedom, exiled from my own home. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound I'd ever taken in combat. I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was getting answers and getting my house back. The next morning, I stormed into the Sunnyvale Estates HOA office, still in my fatigues, my boots thudding against their polished linoleum floor. The place reeked of cheap air freshener and smug authority. Gerald, the HOA president, sat behind his desk, sipping coffee from a mug that said, "World's Best Boss." His too tight polo strained against his gut, and his eyes barely flicked up from his phone as I stood there, a soldier fresh from a war zone, demanding answers. "What do you mean my house is rented?" I said, my voice tight with barely controlled rage. Gerald sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. "Your house was vacant, Mr. Miller," he drawled. "We assumed you'd abandoned it. We leased it to maintain community standards and avoid blight. It's all in the bylaws. Abandoned." I was risking my life in a desert 7,000 miles away, dodging IEDs and insurgents, while this guy assumed I'd just walked away from my home. I slammed my deployment papers on his desk. Official military orders proving where I'd been. I showed him my HOA payment receipts, $2,400 paid a year in advance to cover every fee they could dream up. I'd even hired a kid to mow my lawn weekly to keep the place pristine. "Does this look abandoned to you?" I asked, my voice shaking. Gerald leaned back, unfazed, and said the lease was legally binding. The tenants, he claimed, had every right to stay for 6 more months. 6 months. I'd be stuck in that roach-infested motel, burning through my savings, while strangers slept in my bed. Worse, I found out the HOA was pocketing the rent, $1,800 a month, over $10,000 by now. That should have been mine. I demanded to see the lease. Gerald handed me a flimsy document, and my blood ran cold. The signature line for the property owner was blank. No consent, no authorization, just the HOA's stamp of approval. I wasn't a lawyer, but this smelled like fraud. I called my buddy Tom, a JAG officer who'd helped me with my house purchase. Over the phone, he was livid. "Jake, this is a blatant abuse of power," he said. He dug into the HOA's bylaws and found a vague clause about maintaining community aesthetics that they'd twisted to justify leasing my house without my permission. "It's shady as hell," Tom said, "possibly illegal. But fighting this in court could take a year, maybe 2, and thousands in legal fees." I was a soldier, not a millionaire. I couldn't afford that, and I shouldn't have to. This was my home, not some pawn in Gerald's real estate game. Back at the motel, I paced my tiny room, the neon sign outside buzzing like my thoughts. I pulled out my laptop and scoured my emails for any clue I'd missed. I found my pre-deployment message to Gerald, clearly stating I'd be overseas and had paid all dues. His reply was a curt, "Noted, safe travels." He knew I was deployed, yet he'd rented out my house anyway. I called the bank, hoping they could help. They confirmed my mortgage payments were up to date. Another thing I'd automated before leaving. There was no excuse, no blight, no abandonment. The HOA had seen an opportunity to profit off a soldier's absence, and they took it. I felt helpless, a feeling I wasn't used to. In the field, I could strategize, adapt, fight. But this was a different kind of enemy. Paperwork, bureaucracy, and greed. I couldn't just kick down the door of my own house. I'd end up in jail. That's when I called Marcus, my platoon squad leader and my best friend. We'd survived ambushes together, pulled each other through the worst days. If anyone could help, it was him. "Jake," he said, his voice steady as always. "No pencil-pushing HOA is going to steal your home. The platoon's got your back. Let's take it back, our way." His words lit a fire in me. This wasn't over. Back at the motel, my platoon gathered in my cramped room, the air thick with determination and the faint smell of stale coffee. These were my brothers and sisters, 12 battle-hardened soldiers who'd faced ambushes, sandstorms, and worse together. We'd survived firefights in places most people couldn't pronounce, and now we were facing a different kind of enemy, a greedy HOA that thought it could bully a soldier. Marcus, our squad leader, stood at the foot of my bed, his 6'4" frame, filling the room like a general. "This is a mission," he said, his voice low and steady. "We're not breaking the law, but we're taking your house back, our way." The platoon nodded, eyes gleaming with the same fire we had before any op. This wasn't just about me. It was about justice. We huddled around a wobbly motel table, a map of Sunnyvale Estates spread out like a battlefield schematic. Marcus, our logistics genius, had already scouted the neighborhood. "It's a quiet suburb," he said, pointing to my street. "No security gates, no cameras. The HOA office is 3 blocks away, and Gerald's usually there till 6 p.m. He marked my house with a red X. We hit at dawn, Maximum visibility, minimum resistance. The plan wasn't to intimidate, but to make a statement no one could ignore. We'd show up in full military gear, camouflage vests, boots, dog tags clanking, not to scare anyone, but to remind the world who we were. Soldiers who'd fought for freedom, not suits who'd stolen it. Sarah, our comms expert and resident tech wizard, had been digging for dirt. She'd hacked into the HOA's email server. Don't ask how. She's got skills that'd make a cyber unit jealous. Jackpot, she said, holding up her laptop. She'd found a thread between Gerald and the HOA board, dated a month after I deployed. One email read, "Miller's gone for a year. His house is prime real estate. We can lease it and split the profits." My jaw clenched. They knew I was serving, knew I'd paid my dues, and still saw dollar signs. Sarah printed the emails, hard proof of their scam. "This is our ammo," she said. "We show this to the tenants, the neighbors, and the world." The plan was precise, like a military op. Step 1. Arrive at my house at 600, geared up to look like the platoon we were. Step 2. I'd knock on the door, explain to the tenants they'd been duped by an illegal lease, and offer to help them move out. Immediately. Step 3. If they refused, we'd set up camp on my lawn, tents, gear, the works, until they left. "No violence, no threats," Marcus stressed. "We're soldiers, not thugs." But we'd make it impossible for the HOA to ignore us. Sarah's ace in the hole was a live stream. She'd broadcast the whole thing on social media, tagging local news and veteran groups. "Once this goes viral," she grinned, "Gerald's done." We'd expose the HOA's greed to the neighborhood and beyond, but there were risks. What if the tenants called the cops? Marcus had that covered. "We're a dozen decorated veterans on your legal property," he said. "No cop's gonna arrest us for standing on your lawn with proof of fraud." Still, my gut churned. These tenants weren't the enemy. They were a family, probably clueless about the HOA's scam. I didn't want to scare them, but I needed my home back. We spent hours refining the plan, assigning roles. Marcus would handle any HOA pushback. Sarah would run the live stream, and the rest of the platoon would help move the tenants' stuff if they cooperated. We even packed a U-Haul trailer ready to assist. By midnight, we were locked in, adrenaline pumping like before a patrol. "For Jake," Marcus toasted, raising a water bottle. "For justice," I replied. We were ready. The sun barely peeked over the horizon, painting the sky a fiery orange as our 3 trucks rolled into Sunnyvale Estates at 0600 sharp. The quiet suburban street felt like a battlefield, the hum of our engines cutting through the dawn stillness. My platoon, 12 soldiers in full military gear, camouflage vests, boots, and dog tags glinting, stepped out, our movements precise, like we were back on patrol. Neighbors peeked through curtains, some stepping onto porches in bathrobes, phones already recording. We weren't here to scare anyone, but we meant business. My heart pounded as I led the way to my front door, the same door I'd walked through 1,000 times, now a symbol of everything stolen from me. Marcus gave me a nod, his eyes steady. Sarah adjusted her phone, already live streaming to thousands tuning in. "This is for you, Jake," she whispered. It was go time. I knocked, loud and firm, my knuckles rapping against the familiar wood. The tenant, Brian, opened the door, his eyes widening at the sight of a dozen soldiers on his doorstep. Well, my doorstep. He was in his 30s, wearing a faded t-shirt, his hair messy from sleep. Behind him, I glimpsed his wife clutching a coffee mug, 2 kids peeking from the hallway. "Sir," I said, keeping my voice calm but authoritative, "I'm Jake Miller. This is my house. The HOA rented it to you illegally while I was deployed. We've got proof." I handed him a folder with Sarah's printed emails, the damning evidence of the HOA's scam. Brian's face paled as he scanned the pages, his hands trembling. "We didn't know," he stammered. "We paid 6 months' rent up front. They said it was legit." I believed him. He wasn't the enemy, just another victim of Gerald's greed. I explained we weren't here to threaten them. We'll help you pack and move, I said. You've got 2 hours. Brian nodded, still shell-shocked, and called his wife over. She looked nervous, but agreed after reading the emails. My platoon sprang into action, helping carry boxes, toys, and furniture to the U-Haul we'd brought. The kids, wide-eyed, watched us stack their bikes, one asking Marcus if he was a real soldier. He grinned and ruffled the kid's hair. "Damn right, kiddo." The neighborhood buzzed now, a crowd forming, some cheering, some whispering. Sarah's live stream was blowing up, comments flooding in. "Support our troops! Screw the HOA!" Views climbed past 50,000 in an hour. Then Gerald showed up, his SUV screeching to a halt. He stormed toward us, face red, polo shirt straining. "This is trespassing," he shouted, waving a finger at me. "I'm calling the cops." Marcus stepped forward, towering over him, and handed him a copy of the emails. "Care to explain?" "This on camera, Gerald?" he said, his voice ice cold. Sarah zoomed in, her phone capturing every bead of sweat on Gerald's forehead. The crowd booed, phones out, recording the chaos. Gerald stammered, trying to deflect, but the evidence was ironclad. "You knew I was deployed," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You stole my home and pocketed the rent." The neighbors gasped. Some yelled, "Shame on you." A local news van pulled up, drawn by Sarah's live stream, now at 100,000 views. Gerald's bravado crumbled. He slunk back to his car, muttering about legal action. But we'd won the crowd. By noon, Brian's family was packed, their belongings in the U-Haul. They thanked us, embarrassed, but grateful for our help. I shook Brian's hand, promising to get their last month's rent refunded. As they drove off, my platoon stood on my lawn, victorious. The news crew interviewed us, and Sarah's live stream hit 1 million views. My house was mine again, but more importantly, the HOA's scam was exposed to the world. That night, I sank into my own bed, the familiar creak of the mattress feeling like a hard-won victory. My platoon sprawled across my living room, some on air mattresses, others on the floor, their snores a comforting reminder of the family who'd fought for me. We cracked open a few beers, toasting not just to reclaiming my house, but to standing up against injustice. The weight of the past 48 hours lifted, replaced by a quiet pride. My home, my modest 3-bedroom with its chipped porch paint and backyard dreams, was mine again. But this wasn't just about 4 walls. It was about proving no one, not even a greedy HOA, could take advantage of a soldier and get away with. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing nonstop. Sarah's live stream had exploded, racking up over 2 million views overnight. Comments poured in from veterans, homeowners, and regular folks. "This is why we need to protect our troops. HOAs are the worst." The video was shared across platforms, trending with hashtags like Traum Justice for Jake and Showscam. Local news ran segments, calling it the veterans' victory that shook Sunnyvale Estates. The exposure lit a fire under the neighborhood. Neighbors I barely knew stopped by with casseroles and apologies, saying they'd had no idea the HOA was so corrupt. One older lady, Mrs. Carter, admitted she'd suspected Gerald was shady, but never had proof. "You've done us all a favor," she said, handing me a homemade pie. My lawyer Tom called with bigger news. The viral video had caught the attention of a pro bono legal team specializing in HOA abuse. They were building a class-action lawsuit against the Sunnyvale Estates HOA, and my case was the spark. Sarah's emails revealed the HOA had pulled similar stunts on other homeowners, mostly elderly folks and single parents who couldn't fight back. The lawsuit aimed to hold Gerald and the board accountable, seeking damages for every victim. By week's end, Gerald resigned, his smug grin wiped clean. Rumors swirled he'd left town, unable to face the neighbors he'd fleeced. The HOA board scrambled to elect a new president, a retired teacher who promised transparency. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a start. I reached out to Brian, the tenant, feeling they deserved better. They'd been duped, paying $1,800 a month for a lease that wasn't even legal. Using some of my deployment savings, I refunded their last month's rent, $1,800 I couldn't really spare but felt was right. Brian was floored, nearly in tears, when I handed him the check at a coffee shop. "We thought you'd hate us," he said. His family had found a new rental nearby, and his kids sent me a thank you card with a crayon drawing of a soldier. It's framed on my wall now, a reminder that this fight wasn't about blame, but about doing what's right. My platoon stayed a few days, helping me repaint the living room and fix a leaky faucet the tenants had ignored. Marcus joked we should start a veteran-run HOA, but we all laughed it off. Too much paperwork. Their support meant everything. We'd faced war together, but this battle felt personal, a fight for one of our own. As they left, Sarah hugged me and said, "Keep telling this story, Jake. People need to hear it." She was right. This wasn't just my victory. It was a wake-up call for anyone dealing with power-hungry HOAs or injustice. So here's my challenge. To you, don't let the Geralds of the world win. If you're facing an HOA nightmare or any unfair fight, get proof, rally your crew, and stand your ground. You don't need a platoon, just people who've got your back. Hit that like button if you're with me, subscribe to join the fight, and share this story to spread the word. Let's hold the powerful accountable together. And I want to hear from you. What's your craziest HOA story or injustice you've faced? Drop it in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going. This is Staff Sergeant Jake Miller, signing off, back in my home where I belong.